For the past 2 decades, The Sims has been the undisputed monarch of life simulators and has always had a special place in my and other people's hearts by allowing us players to escape our jobs, schoolwork, chores, even social life by managing a job, school, chores, and social life. We can't deny that the franchise is a revenue juggernaut for EA, boasting over 70 million players as of 2023 and reaching $1 billion in revenue in 2019, just 5 years after its release. This is an impressive feat for any 10-year-old game, but this success has been riding on predatory practices, with EA having some of the most egregious representations of greed that the company cleverly hides behind pretty furniture and empty promises. But before we move forward, I'd just like to invite everyone to please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel and helps me make more content like this. Now, we know that The Sims has become quite the greedy entity, but this wasn't always the case. Back in 2000, when The Sims first came out, it was a sleeper hit and did something no other game at the time could or tried to do. When you think of Deus Ex, Hitman, Command & Conquer, Perfect Dark, Diablo 2, most of these games were very action-oriented and targeted a specific demographic, young men. But The Sims took a different approach and is, by design, a virtual dollhouse, which opened the world of gaming to women everywhere. My own sister, who's not a gamer by any means, has played every Sims game since the first. But this doesn't mean that it's a strictly girls' game. No, The Sims is a great franchise for everybody because of the freedom it gives you to interact with your Sims in fun and challenging ways. The Sims 2 and 3 kept refining this design, making each iteration better than the last, with newer features, spin-offs, and better Sims AI. So of course, when The Sims 4 was coming out, the expectation was much higher. It's a new generation, there was new things that were being expected of it, but sadly none of those expectations were really met. Since its release over 10 years ago, The Sims 4 hasn't really lived up to its full potential as a sequel, which I argue is an intentional move from EA. During the first games, they still followed the traditional way of selling games. You make a decent base game that's profitable, then you release expansions to create longevity and more revenue streams for that game. Then you improve on what you made and repeat the cycle for the sequel. But now things have changed, and it has to do with EA's vision for the game. When The Sims 4 came out, people were largely confused because for a full-priced game, it was quite shallow and, quite frankly, pretty boring. Let's play a quick game to test your Sims 4 knowledge. I'm going to be listing down certain features, and I want you to tell me which one of them were present in the base game at launch. Alright? Alright, you ready? Here are the answers. Well, would you look at that? They had none of these at launch. And what's funny is this isn't even the full list. Essentially, so many features were stripped down. Base worlds like Willow Creek were smaller, less open, not even fully colored in the map screen for some reason. Building was clunky, it was limited, no basements, no pools, and they had much fewer furniture. There were tons of loading screens and glitches. You get the idea, right? But why did it release that way in the first place? Oh my god. Well, it was because the title was supposed to come out as a multiplayer experience. But when the whole SimCity debacle happened, it seemed like they tried to pivot heavily away from it. They also haven't had much success in creating a multiplayer experience for this franchise, and this was seen with the failure of The Sims Online back in the day. So why would EA be trying to force multiplayer for it if it keeps failing? Well, there's a simple answer to that, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get to that later. What matters is that a lot of the limitations and the stripped down features were because the game wasn't originally designed to be single player. As such, the base game launch was widely panned, and they needed to make changes fast in terms of patches and updates, and although it took a few years to get there, the base game is actually pretty decent now. But accompanying these changes to the game is also a change in terms of the business model, especially as the multiplayer angle wasn't going to work this time around. And the one that The Sims 4 had shifted to is actually something we're quite familiar with today. Live service gaming is the nauseating paradigm that publishers seem to aspire to, but let's not forget that before the likes of Fortnite exploded into the mainstream in 2017, some of the early pioneers of the live service genre came out in 2013 and 2014. Destiny is the one considered to be the progenitor of this model, and unfortunately, this was followed by franchises like GTA and even The Sims, which might not look like a live service game by conventional standards today, but it fits the actual definition of games as a service. Also, one of the producers said so himself back in 2016, so there's literally no debating this. But unlike Destiny, which has been somewhat dethroned by other live service shooters, The Sims 4 was able to keep itself secure because of the de facto monopoly it has in life sim games. I mentioned a lot of complaints that felt like beating a dead horse at this point, but one point that I haven't seen emphasized enough is that any other game or franchise, especially ones with a lot of hype or clout that release in such a state, very rarely survive for as long as The Sims 4 has. And in case you've been living under the proverbial rock all this time, any franchise that EA touches specifically tends to die a gruesome death. But The Sims 4, for some reason, has stayed alive, which is the exception rather than the rule, and is a miracle that I attribute to the fans that have stayed loyal to the franchise and the game's lack of competitors more than EA's competence in handling the title. It's a lot more evident when we think about the pricing. When we think of the biggest games of 2014, the average cost of a base game was about $60, which The Sims 4 followed until they lowered prices 2 years after. Having a bare bones game at that price point should have been a crime, but the anomaly is in the DLC pricing. Expansions during those years, like The Witcher 3's Blood and Wine and Hearts of Stone and Bloodborne's Old Hunters DLC, were ranging around the $20 to $30 range. In comparison, the first Sims 4 expansion was Get to Work and cost a whopping $40 when it launched in March of 2015. $40 in 2015 is about $53 in today's money. That is insane, and they never changed this pricing. For comparison, even Phantom Liberty, which came out in 2023, only cost about $30. Shadow of the Erdtree got a lot of flack for charging $40. As of the time of writing, we've got about 17 total expansions, which doesn't include the game packs, stuff packs, and the kits. What used to be such a revolutionary thing that the first game did to bring new life into an already good base game has evolved into a horrible practice of drip-feeding content behind massive paywalls, which is something that the franchise has been guilty of even in the prior games. And buying all of the current DLC at full price will set you back thousands of dollars, which is something you will almost never see with other single-player experiences, as most attempts that do end up with a lot of backlash. It really does bring into perspective how the whole controversy behind Shadow of the Erdtree's pricing of $40 for a Game of the Year experience is just peanuts to what The Sims 4 is doing. Can you imagine if From Software announced 16 more expansions worth $40 and dozens of weapon or armor DLC for Elden Ring? They'd get stoned and dragged on the streets. Now, of course, defenders are gonna make that claim that, Sai, you're being an idiot. Don't you know the best way to do this is to get them at the 50 to 60% discount during their sales? Duh. And you don't have to buy all the DLCs. Duh. But, and hear me out, even at half price, you're still being charged a whopping $400 to $500, $600 for features that are very inconsistent in quality. One Reddit post I saw from 2 years ago fueled my anger a little bit because based on what the person found, what used to be content that can be obtained for 5 expansions in The Sims 3, for example, is now spread out into about 20 or so DLC, where you'll need to buy a combination of expansions and stuff packs to get similar content, with some previous existing content still missing, in fact. And for $40, you're going to expect that the quality is pretty high. But another problem is that the underlying software of The Sims 4 has been a mess. This is an issue that's explained in better detail by YouTubers like Satch, but essentially the more packs you put in, the worse the game performs. And since there are multiple different combinations of packs and expansions that different people can have, it creates issues that may be unique to that combination, which is a nightmare for devs to patch. This is why most times when they patch out an issue in one area, it may cause issues elsewhere or in specific scenarios that are difficult to notice, especially if you have mods enabled. Number 2, some players are fans of previous entries like myself. So of course, there's that expectation that certain base game features will be kept. So if it takes you 3 years to put toddlers into your game, by then my attention has already gone into other games. I'm sorry. There are also a ton of videos from creators here on YouTube and posts on Reddit who even go so far as to claim that certain packs are necessary to have a well-rounded experience. Like, for example, I've never liked how they kept seasons behind a paywall since The Sims 2, because weather and seasonal patterns are a core part of simulator games, and almost all modern ones have it by default. Another big problem comes up when we take a deeper look at the money. I mentioned in the beginning how the franchise might be a revenue juggernaut for EA, but after looking into the financials, I noticed that there was something I missed. Now, the exact revenue numbers are a little hard to find, but I'm looking into one made by a website called NetBet, who approximate that The Sims 4 earns around $460 million a year. Of course, take this with a grain of salt, but if it's true, that doesn't sound like a bad number, right? But when you bring in the total revenue that EA earns annually, which is $7.56 billion as of 2024, $460 million is only around 6% of their revenue. Essentially, The Sims, although bringing in a lot of money, is quite literally a speck relative to the other revenue drivers of EA. This is a problem because if The Sims isn't a core business for the company and profitability goes down, the franchise might be in danger, which isn't a far-fetched thought considering EA's history with its acquired titles. On the consumer side, this is a bad thing because now we're getting a product that's inherently subpar, with major overhauls or updates being unlikely. Since the game moved into a free-to-play model, EA will have to keep dishing out new expansions and DLC to keep the gravy train coming. But since this impact is minuscule, making improvements or major fixes is just not going to be worth the effort. And because it's free, what ends up happening is that users can further justify these purchases mentally because the base game costs nothing. And to be fair, there's been a lot of good stuff released from time to time. It's just that they drip feed it to users and ask us to keep paying more. But because they can put it up on sale and you see all the marketing and promotions, and then you watch all these content creators showcasing the neat features that you can do with the newer packs, that's when the FOMO takes over. Even more so if you see a feature you've been asking for years included in the new DLC. And with nothing else in the market for this niche, it becomes even more justifiable, especially for players who only really play The Sims. Now I've gone into stuff that's very depressing, but let's step away from that and talk about some other newer stuff that EA has in store. In the past months, the company recently announced some plans it has for the franchise this year, and I'm a little concerned. The first is the Sims movie, which I guess is pretty interesting, but until I see a trailer, I can't really give any judgments. But the Loki director is on board, and Margot Robbie's Lucky Chap Entertainment is producing it, so I can be cautiously optimistic. But I also anticipate that this movie will have its own tie-in expansion or stuff pack, so whoopee. This will also likely create a newfound craze for the franchise, which was something we saw with the FNAF movie as well as the Fallout Amazon series. So if you're somehow watching this video when the movie comes out and you're a first-time player of the series, well, welcome, and sorry, I guess. But the more interesting development would have to be Project Rene, which, newsflash, is not The Sims 5. They explicitly claim that they will not create a sequel to The Sims. To be fair, the rationale for this seems reasonable, as making everyone start again from scratch will erase thousands of dollars worth of expansions that players have accumulated through the years. Instead, EA's bold new plan for The Sims 4 and its new title Project Rene is summed up in one word: multiplayer. Now, I briefly hinted on the multiplayer aspect in the start of this video and how EA keeps trying to push it, and that's mostly because of one reason. In the absence of any credible competition, multiplayer live service games are just more profitable for the monopolizing franchise. This has been the case for Fortnite, this has been the case for sports games like FC and NBA 2K, and without an alternative to take players away or to create pressure to innovate, it will happen to The Sims. I'm not saying multiplayer is a bad thing, it's just that they've already tried that and failed with The Sims Online, like I mentioned. And the sentiment among gamers now for multiplayer live service games could not be more pessimistic. For every Marvel Rivals or Helldivers, we've got a Concord, X-Defiant, and Suicide Squad. Another problem is with the unresolved technical issues of The Sims 4, as people have been clamoring for a sequel mostly because the current game still has a lot of technical issues that are still yet to be addressed. So creating a multiplayer component to this feels like it'll just create a new headache for both the consumers and the dev team. But that's not Project Rene. No, that's just the multiplayer expansion they've got planned for The Sims 4. Their bold new strategy is a mobile game. No, wait, mobile-friendly game, my bad. So, if you're trying to speedrun alienating your core fan base, this is one way to do it. If The Sims 4 was just a 10-year test run into live service for the franchise, then Project Rene is the nail in that coffin. But also, don't they already have like 2 other mobile titles? Was the market for that so significant that a third was necessary? Now, of course, a lot of things can change and I could definitely be wrong. And it's not like it's all bad. The 25th anniversary behind The Sims announcement just went up where they talked about some of the upcoming updates they're doing, with some already being in the game, like complete overhauls to towny homes, some new free stuff, and a new main menu. The menu's kind of divisive, but I personally feel like it looks okay, especially since the previous menu was kind of in your face with the ads, and the new towny homes are actually kind of sick. They add a little bit more personality to each of the households. The announcement itself, though, was kinda short. 7 minutes was a bit underwhelming for a 25th anniversary announcement, I'm not gonna lie, but I'd like to see what the full rollout would look like in the coming weeks before we start hating on it. But looking at the game state overall, it's not terrible. And if you're satisfied with it and having a lot of fun, don't let me or other people tell you how to enjoy it. My goal is to highlight how the franchise has been going further and further into anti-consumer territory. That's been going on even before The Sims 4. Let's not pretend that The Sims 3 store was any better. Come on now. But really the point here is to be aware about things like this, right? To vote with our wallets and to tell these companies that these types of practices are just not okay. If not for us, then for other players who want to have a good Sims experience. But I'm not your parents or your HR manager. I'm not here to morally grandstand. Even if we just talk about this from a practical or financial standpoint, if you play games for variety, value for money, innovative gameplay, strong narratives, or you want to support other developers, the amount EA is charging for all these packs is literally dozens of AAA games, maybe hundreds of indie developed ones, including other existing life sims like Stardew Valley and Fields of Mystria. But in the end, I don't blame consumers for something this systemic, because to me, the best cure for any type of industry greed, aside from government intervention, is competition. And interestingly, we got a few lined up that seem highly promising. 3 in particular have made waves, and I'm excited for all of them. Nivalis is a cyberpunk-themed simulator with weather simulation that doesn't require a seasons pack, thank you very much. Izzzyzzz is another big one, coming out in March this year and takes the graphics up to a whole new level, focusing a lot on realism. This is contrasted by Paralives, which takes a more artistic flavor to the aesthetic. All 3 games seem to have layers to the activities, the character creator, and even the world dynamics like weather. Honestly, I'm rooting for the success of all of them, especially as Life by You, which was highly anticipated to be the most comparable life sim game to The Sims, was cancelled last year. Do I think any of them will topple The Sims? Not really. The Sims is too big and we gotta see how the games stack up first. But also, I'm not hoping for The Sims to get brutally destroyed anyways. I want the franchise to improve. I want the publishers to feel pressured by newer products, because that's how everyone's gonna win, especially the players who have spent the most money in this franchise, because now you'll be getting more bang for your buck. If a strong competitor can give players more options and can make EA do better, that's all I could really ask for. But we'll just have to wait and see if these newer players can walk the talk. But that's it for me. I'd love to hear what you guys think about The Sims down in the comments below. Do you agree with the stuff I said, or maybe you think I missed something? Again, healthy discussions are always welcome, so feel free to voice your thoughts. Do like and subscribe, it really helps small creators like me grow, and go ahead and watch my other stuff as well. This is Sai from Fireplace Gaming, and I hope you have a great year ahead. Catch you later.